Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. We have a lot of things to talk about, but if you haven't seen the video that I did 3 days ago, go watch it right now. It is a good precursor to what we're going to be discussing here. So, we've been right. For most of the things, whatever we were assessing, we've been right. And the video from 3 days ago, when we were discussing that Kherson is apparently going to get maybe abandoned, is pretty much coming into fruition. At least we're seeing the preparations for them. There are a little bit variations that is possible, but let's just get over this. So we're going to start with the Kherson offensive. Now, I'm not going to go in details into tactical movements. I think there are other channels that are covering it a lot better. And I really recommend you watching Reporting from Ukraine. He's a lot bigger channel than I am. And secondly, he goes really well into details. I'm going to cover the other aspects of this. Firstly, he didn't mention it, but the line that is currently held by the Russian troops, this is actually the second defense line that the Russians had. And this is where essentially all the major fortifications that Russians are having, so like reinforced concrete places, all the ditches that protect from fast advances, and everything is located very densely here. And remember, there is a lot of forces in this area. Secondly, Reporting from Ukraine mentions that Novokakhovka, they are draining some of the water. This is not completely confirmed. I tried to find out some sources for this, but it's pretty possible that they are doing it. But let's go over thing one by one. Obviously, if they're draining the water, that means that they're preparing to blow the dam up. But let's go point by point on what's happening. Firstly, we know that some of the things are getting extracted from the north bank of the river here. We see both people leaving around the Antonov Bridge, and we also know that some things are leaving of the Novokakhovka Dam, and there is actually pictures even there taking some kind of ferries, which now apparently have been blown up by taking like this. If you can see, I'm actually just gonna enlarge here. There is like a channel here in between two islands. So this channel has been taken by some of the floating barges that Russians are using. So what is happening? Are the Russians leaving Kherson? Not really. As far as we are aware, it's the civilian population that is being sent out of Kherson right now. And the second part is some of the forces, yes, but mostly those are light infantry and like a police force that is being sent out of Kherson. And obviously the region's administration is being sent out. That does not mean that Kherson is about to get abandoned, because we actually know that more forces are being sent in to Kherson by barges, all the ships and so on. And most of them are mobilized troops. Now, this creates essentially two possibilities for us that can happen. Firstly, we could have been right? And Kherson is preparing to be abandoned. What then can happen is that we can see some of the more battle capable troops, they're going to be prepared to get out of Kherson. So Russia will get first more troops into the area, then they will try to essentially replace the troops that has the battle capabilities and so on with newer mobilized troops, and then get the experienced troops out of there. So basically provide them with a meat shield for escape. That is option number one. And option number two is that Kherson is actually getting reinforced, that this is actually a big trap. So what they want to tell the press, to tell the public is like, hey, look at us, we're leaving and so on, and actually have a lot more fortified position here, and then essentially preventing Ukraine to take Kherson. So supply troops as long as they take, which is again possible, especially if they're going to start provoking Ukraine somehow by attacking. But to be honest, it's a very shitty plan that only the Russians can think of, because I don't really expect Ukrainians to be that stupid to start attacking into reinforced positions with many new troops. I think Ukraine will just happily stay where they are and just use artillery to destroy whatever things are left here on Kherson, especially because if the civilian population gets out of Kherson, deported from the Kherson area, then it's going to be basically a hunting season open for the Ukrainian forces. That is Kherson. So one of the important things is that we definitely know that Putin would like to have Kherson still up until at least November 5th, when there is going to be, I think it was G20 meeting that he wants to attend. Because for that, Putin really wants to come with a strong position, because he really wants to get that Eastern Bloc countries to start some kind of platform to negotiate what's happening with Ukraine without Ukraine. Maybe proposing that the plan that we discussed, that he's going to give up the northern part of Kherson, while then essentially keeping all this eastern and southern part of Ukraine that he's supposedly annexed to himself. That is the plan that we've discussed 3 days ago, and it seems that this is going to be the topic of discussion for the G20 summit. Then we travel a little bit further along the map, and we get into this northern side. Now, here, this is where I really advise you guys to stop listening to Russian propaganda or Russian sources and taking them at face value. I was actually a little bit mad that you guys follow me and you still, well, okay, sorry, some of you still keep doing this, like some kind of worrying about, well, Georgie, there is this like a reporter that I'm listening to, and then he said that Russians are actually counterattacking on the north side, so they actually took some land around Kupiansk. And I was like, well, what land did they took around Kupiansk? And I actually found out what land it was at the end for some. So what happened is that Russians were able to essentially, for a short time, reoccupy this settlement of Horobivka, a one settlement. And the Russian propaganda and these channels just like, wow, Russia is recapturing territories on the east. It is soon the Kharkov will fall. Look at that. Stop. You need to stop and rethink what you're doing and who you're following. Keep your information clean. Keep to the trusted sources. Watch my channel, like and subscribe. There we go. Plug-in complete. But overall, we now get some kind of news about what the Ukraine plan is. And the unfortunate truth is that, well, I mean, maybe fortunate truth, but that the plan of Russians is awful. It's awful for Russians. It's completely terrible. So when we were discussing that the newly mobilized troops will come in, and they did, and because they were holding Liman for some time, they were actually able to reinforce the defense line between Svatovo and Kremina. And this apparently is going to be a line that we're going to see for a while now. Ukrainians were kind of not advancing as fast as they were hoping, and now the lines are reinforced. And there is, because of the mobilized, there is enough troops there. However, Russians and Russian command, they don't feel comfortable letting these troops defend. So in order to prevent Russians from essentially collapsing in their defense, they are using the mobilized troops to conduct assaults on the Ukrainian position. So along these lines, like not the precise battle lines, but just so you understand the directions and where things are happening, they're sending a lot of these waves of literally like Russian servicemen and mobilized troops to try to attack Ukrainian positions. And this obviously ends up in a lot of bodies. But this is what the plan of Russia is. They want to get the mobilized troops as much as they can. So they essentially buy the time until maybe December, when some kind of trained group of mobilized troop will come in. They are literally throwing in bodies and attacking Ukraine, so Ukraine doesn't prepare another attacking push, this is so inhumane use of human lives. This is actually like astonishing. How can a country do? Obviously, this is benefiting Ukrainian side, because while the December mobilized troops will come, Russia will still use resources. We are now with this kind of new plan that Russia is proposing here. It is a full-blown attrition warfare we're going to go on. And to be honest, I don't see how Russia can win this. Yes, okay, let's think about this way. Okay, they can mobilize a million forces, but we see that their equipment is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And one of the main critique for the Western powers is that why are you not supplying enough equipment to supply Ukraine right as it needs right now? Why is it always like, you have to have a schedule and schedule delivery over time in like a long term? And this is not looking good for the Russians, especially because the training capacity for the Western powers is increasing. Right now, we already know that Western powers are capable of essentially training 50,000 to 60,000 Ukrainian troops every couple of months, which is huge. The Russian training will not even come close to what kind of training Ukrainians will get. And we know that supplies are also growing in the numbers, growing in quality. So Ukraine is gonna break this. While Russians mobilize troops, and even the ones that they supposedly will have a good training that comes up, they're gonna come up with nothing but old equipment. That's the unfortunate part. So Russia decided to win this war in the worst, to lose this war in the bloodiest possible way for the Russian people. They decided to sacrifice as much people as they can for Putin to stay stay a little bit longer in power. That is just crazy. For me, this is mind-blowing just how little the human life matters for the Russians, their own human lives, not even Ukrainian ones. And Bakhmut. So around Bakhmut, the situation is very hard but stable. Ukrainians are holding. It's a very difficult position to be in. Apparently, there is some kind of new plan by Russians that they ask that Bakhmut needs to be captured by the end of October. It's gonna fail because here is one of the most elite forces of Ukrainians, the 93rd Mechanized Brigade, and they are doing wonders how they're defending Bakhmut and how strong they are in their resolve. It's a complete World War I scenario here, but it's amazing what they're doing. People asked me, should we expect the attack from Belarus? And the current answer is I do not think so, because firstly, they need to get enough forces in there. There might be attack on Belarus if the Crimean scenario that we say that Crimea is going to get, like they're going to get the experienced troops out of Crimea, Kherson, and then from Kherson they're going to send them maybe up north, and then they use those experienced troops to be essentially the core, plus the mobilized, plus Belarusian army as a support, and then they can either try to attack Kiev or maybe try to essentially go for Lviv to cut the supply lines. None of that will work. None of that will work. Like, Ukraine is not just going to sit and wait for it. We are now going to be in a pure attrition warfare for a while now, but we need to understand that this is not going to be the same situation that we had during the summer, because during the summer, Ukraine just needed to kind of hang on for a little bit while. Right now, it's now Russia that's trying to hang on, and they're just throwing bodies, like as much bodies as they can. Current the situation around Bakhmut is about 1 to 6 casualty ratios. And the more time will go, the more advanced weapons and more trained troops Ukraine will get, the worse it's going to become for the Russians. Russia will never be as strong as it was during the end of summer. It's just going to go downhill. Mobilized is just going to be buying time. Putin is praying for something to happen, something to change, but nothing will. The only thing that will change is that Russia will lose and Ukraine will prevail. See you next time.